live on YouTube, and this is Male Entrepreneur Podcast. Let me go ahead and start the recording, actually.
Is this 128?
129, I think. Give me 1 second.
I-
Record on this computer. And double check that real quick. Podcast episodes, Purdeep. Yep, so this is Male Entrepreneur Podcast 129, and we are live in 3, 2. All right, welcome back to the Male Entrepreneur Podcast with your host, Purdeep Sangha, the male entrepreneur himself. Purdeep, how you doing today, man?
Awesome, man. I love how you could just turn it on and go from regular conversation to just right into that intro. That's awesome.
Years of work in the radio industry.
Yeah, it takes experience, right?
It does, but you get used to it. How you doing, by the way?
Doing pretty good, man. I'm doing pretty good. I'm a little sore today. I worked out a little bit extra hard this morning, so I'm feeling it. My legs and my chest are sore. I haven't gotten this sore for a while, so it's a good sign. I like the feeling.
All right, nice. And I noticed for the people viewing the podcast, not just listening, you're wearing some new glasses today.
Yeah, I'm wearing some funky glasses. If you take a look at them, it's funny because I was in a video conference call a couple of days ago, and I looked at my video. And I'm like, man, it looks like I'm at the gun range. These glasses are a little bit different, right? So yeah, you'd think I'd have like a little gun under my arm here, but I don't. Yeah, they're cool glasses. My wife got them for me. They're called True Dark glasses, and she got them because she works at the hospital, and she's always basically exposed to a bunch of light, and she's been having trouble sleeping and getting proper sleep patterns, and she knew that I was sitting in front of the computer, so she bought me a pair as well. So I'm testing these suckers out to see how well they are. They actually help me quite a bit in terms of making sure that my eyes aren't as sore. So sitting in front of the computer all day, I do spend a lot of time, probably too much time in front of the computer, and by the end of the night, my eyes are done, man. And so these are actually helping. So if you're looking for a solution, if you're sitting in front of a computer, or if you're around bright lights, I would highly recommend True Dark. They're super glasses, and they're not expensive. They're like $100 for a pair.
This episode was not brought to you by True Dark glasses, by the way, not a sponsor. What do we got on the agenda for today's podcast?
Well, we're going to be talking about settling. So settling in life, and the big question is, are you settling? Are you settling for a part or an aspect of your life? Or are you settling for life in general, just the way you're living your life? I just see so many people struggling, so many guys, settling, that it's almost like they're struggling. So that's a question to ask. I know, being in obviously a guy and being an entrepreneur, having a family, there's so many different aspects to life that if we actually broke it down, there's quite a bit to life than our day-to-day stuff that we just think about. Because when we're going through the day, it doesn't seem like a whole lot. But when you break it down, okay, you got to get up, you got to feed yourself, you exercise, you have to keep yourself hydrated. You're in a relationship, you not only have to keep yourself happy, you got to keep your spouse happy. You got kids, right? You got the kids got their school. There's so many components to life. And the question is, which one of those, or which areas of those parts of your life are you actually settling for? Because I think a lot of people, maybe they don't have high enough standards, Nathan. Maybe they don't feel like they can reach higher standards. Maybe they feel like they only deserve to settle, that they don't deserve more in life. But I think there's just that much more. I think it's just like anything else, just like working out that I was talking about. Sometimes you got to push yourself a little bit harder and you see the results.
I think there's a couple different ways to go here. Let's first jump into, what do you mean by settling? And for the people that are out there listening right now, they probably are thinking of at least one aspect of their life that they're settling in. But what do you mean when you say, are you settling?
Really good question. It's really, are you living a life where you're just telling yourself, it's good enough? It's good enough for me. or it's good enough for what I deserve, rather than having the best, rather than having the highest quality or the highest standard, or even your happiness. Are you settling for a certain level of happiness? And that really is just good enough, because I see so many people just, I sometimes I say this to myself. I say, that's good enough, and then I realize I'm like, well, what would it be like if I just maybe took it a little bit further, one step further, maybe better than just good enough. And that's really, if I take a look at it, I see a lot of people. I think the biggest thing that people are settling for in their life is really one big area is a relationship. I see that quite a bit. There's a time in my period where probably my wife and I thought about that as well. Like, are we just settling? And we both had a good conversation and said, we got to both pick up our ends of the bargain and actually make this relationship a lot better. So it's going past that point of just being good enough, because good enough just gets you average results, gets you average happiness. It's really you living this life to the fullest potential, and that is doing more than just settling.
So I feel like I'm going to be honest and open myself up for a little bit of criticism here. I feel like in my own life, I definitely settle with my health.
Mm,
I don't exercise as much as I know that I need to, or that as much as I did when I was a younger kid. Um, and I think that a lot of people, maybe in order to give extra energy, and maybe this is just an excuse I make for myself, but I stay up until 2 o'clock in the morning working, and then I wake up the next day and I've got a client meeting at 8:30 in the morning. And do I really have time to go out and get a jog in the morning? Maybe I'll try and get it later. Then later gets busy because I have other things going. And so sometimes, in order to not settle in one aspect of life, it feels like I'm forced to settle in other aspects of
mm,
life. But then on the other hand, one of my favorite books, Orphan X, it's a fiction book. He's a um, he's a guy that has a bunch of rules that he lives by, and one of them is how you do anything is how you do everything. And so I think to myself, well, if I'm allowing myself to settle in this one aspect of life, is that also subconsciously causing me to settle in other aspects of life where I'm not even realizing it? And so there's the two sides of the coin, I guess. Do I settle in one aspect so that I can do more in another? Or
mm.
is that actually counterintuitive, and settling in this one aspect actually leads me to also settle in the other aspects?
I think you bring up some really good points there, Nathan, because the first one is you're talking about settling. And I think a lot of people, I see people, how do I put this? Is that on one end, they see things as doing it okay or settling. And on the other side, they see the extreme of perfection, right? If they're not settling, they have to go to the extreme of being perfect. You don't have to be that way. You can be somewhere in between as well. There's always that gray area. So it's just taking things a little bit further. But you touched on something a little bit even more important, which is energy, right? Because you have a finite amount of energy. And I talk about this all the time. Your most important resource is your energy, your life energy that you have within you. And that life energy, you have to determine where you want to use it and where you want to present it. And interesting enough, you spend energy, basically you exhale energy and you actually take energy in. So the question is, what are the activities that you are doing to actually bring more energy to your life? And I think that's the difference, because some people will go out of their way. So for example, working out for me is a form of actually getting energy. It's expending physical energy, but I'm getting mental and I'm getting an emotional energy way more in return. And that for me is enough ROI for to force myself to continue to do that. So I think that's really what it comes down to, is the level of energy. So your level of energy at work, when you're working till 2 o'clock, for example, and then getting up early for your client meetings, maybe if you tried or you put some energy into working out, will that help you get more energy for your meetings? Will that help you be more clear in other aspects of your life? Again, it's trial and error. There's no perfect formula, but it really comes down to the energy levels, because you can physically feel the energy, you can emotionally feel the energy. There's a mental component to the energy. And ultimately, that's what it is. Throughout the day, we do things that either give us energy or we do things that take energy away from us. I think, based on what you just said, Nathan, not necessarily for your situation, I think people settle in a lot of ways because sometimes it takes too much energy to do more than just settle.
So I'm gonna turn this back around on you
Yeah.
because I
Okay.
know that you're very much into mindfulness and you're very much into meditation and a lot of the stuff like that. There's some people who say learning to be happy with what you got is more important than constantly trying to get the things that you want, or that true happiness isn't in getting the things that you want, it's being happy with what you've got. How does that fit in with settling? A lot of people might be asking, especially like maybe in a relationship, um, am I settling or should I learn how to be happy with the person that I'm with in my goals
Mhm.
and in my life, in my business? Am I settling or should I learn to be happy with what I've got in the car that I have or the whatever it may be? Am I settling or should I learn how to be happy with what I have?
Wow, that's a powerful, powerful thought, Nathan. And I think that's one that so many people face. I know I face that in a relationship. And again, I'm an open book. I felt this myself. The first thing is when we take a look at happiness, it is from within. And a person is most happy, from my experience and the work that I've done with other people and other men, is when you feel like you are the man that you want to be. That's true happiness, regardless of what the situation is around you. And that's one of the core premises of my new book, is really around, okay, you got to work on yourself first. And when you're at that level, it doesn't matter if you lose a bunch of money. It doesn't matter. In all honesty, I'm at such a comfort level in myself. I'm always growing, though. I'm never perfect. I don't view myself as being that perspective, but I like myself. I'm comfortable with myself. I like the progress that I'm making in terms of my own personal growth. That if my wife decided to leave me tomorrow, I'd be okay with it. I'd be fully, completely comfortable with it. If she decided to take my kids, would I like it? No, but I would be comfortable with it because I am complete in terms of the man that I want to be. And so for me, that is the most important thing. But when you get to that level, that's when the magic starts to happen. And that's when it's almost like that miracle formula where things around you start to change as well. I can tell you that my wife appreciates me at a different level because she knows I have that comfort in myself. She knows that I love her to death, but she knows that there's no, okay, this guy doesn't have any, or he's got insecurities, or he's not confident with himself, or whatever that is, that she can play on. Because we used to play that game in the past, right? We used to play that game. And there was a point in time where, maybe I have to take a look at myself as well. And there were times that I said to myself, do I deserve this level of relationship? And And at that time, I didn't, because there were things in the relationship that I was doing that I wasn't realizing that was hurting our relationship. So I needed to change that first. And I'm always learning, and I'm never a perfect husband. I'm never a perfect father. I'm always growing. But there's also that point where where an individual has to say and take a look and say, okay, am I truly the best version of myself? And am I truly not just being the best version, but am I continuously trying to grow and putting in the effort to grow? So if you're not a perfect husband, are you doing the best you can to actually grow and better yourself as a husband? Because that is the more important thing, right? As long as you're trying and you're actually on the road to progress, that's important. But there is also that line that, because I see this all the time as well, where you mentioned it, people will tell themselves, do I just deserve this? Right? Do I, maybe I just deserve this level of happiness in my relationship? I don't think you should. If you're at that point where you're comfortable with who you are as a person and truly genuinely putting that, like, comfort, putting away the ego, right? There's a difference, because the ego puts a mask on and says, you know what, you're perfect or you're good. It's the other person. When you remove that ego and you look at yourself and you say, you know what, I'm at fault at this particular area. I could do this better, but I'm growing, I'm learning. If you're doing that, and your partner isn't stepping up, you do deserve happiness. There's a moment that you have to say and tell yourself, okay, I deserve better, right? And at that point, then you have to take a look. Is it a conversation you need to have? Is it past that conversation stage? It really depends on your relationship.
So that brings me to another question. I'm a member of a couple of very high level masterminds, and some of the guys in there are uh, multi-millionaires. They have the trophy wife, they have all of the material goods, they have time to make sure they get in their workout every day. They've accomplished everything that they set out to accomplish. They never settled, and they're still miserable. And it seems like a lot of them, they have everything that they thought would make them happy, but like you mentioned, they're not happy with who they are. And I think a lot of times we settle for that. We settle on, well, I'm going to do the things that society thinks I should do, or I'm going to do the things that my wife or my parents think I should do. And they think that that's going to get them a sense of well being. And then they're completely miserable when they get to that point.
And it really comes down to, if we take a look at the old teachings, let's just say from Marcus Aurelius, for example, or Aristotle, it really comes down to one thing, right? The premise that we talk about and the core concept of what I teach for men is really one thing: it's character. When you are comfortable with who you are from a character perspective, it's a word that we don't use very often. We use it from the perspective of, in books, for example, to represent an illustration of someone in a storyline, but we never talk about it from the perspective of a man's character, right? That doesn't come up that much these days. I remember my grandfather, my dad talking about that all the time. That person's character, or you need to work on your character, right? Being a man is about your character. And that really hit home for me, because that character is what brings you happiness, right? It doesn't matter if you take a look at the storyline, the whole movies, books, whatever it is, the whole premise behind what people connect to isn't necessarily what they've achieved, or what fancy house they have, all the millions of dollars, or whatever that is, a trophy wife. It's who that person has become along the way, right? And Nathan, you know this better than anyone, being a copywriter, right? It's a hero's journey that people go through that really creates that level of happiness. I'm a firm believer that, you know, you just brought up honestly, this just spurred for me, is really settling in your own character. I think that's the first place to really start. Is, are you happy with your own character? Do you believe that you need growth? What is your growth plan for your character? And then you will realize that maybe you are settling in other areas of your life.
So for the people listening and they're thinking to themselves, yeah, I'm settling in at least this one area, or maybe I'm settling in a bunch of different areas of my life. What are your thoughts on what to do next?
Yeah, the first thing is do an introspective view in terms of where you think you are as an individual. Do you believe that you need to step up a little bit? And the other piece is also take counsel as well. And I like to call it the wisdom council. And that's really a panel, or even people that aren't even around anymore. But what would they tell you? Right? If you put them together, what would they tell you? All of these wise people, men or women, whoever it is, what insight would they give you? Because sometimes we get caught up in our own worlds. A lot of times we do, and we can't see that. We can't see that we're settling, and other people will openly tell us. How many times have we heard, and I've said this to other men very cautiously. I've heard this myself in the past, that, hey, Pradeep, you're settling for this. Where I thought I was doing okay, they're saying you're settling, right? And I think that external perspective is the most important thing. So if I was to sum it up, is to get as many different perspectives as you can about the situation first. And then take a look and have an honest approach and say, okay, am I really settling for this?
Mhm. I think in my own personal life, having a coach, having someone like you there for me, having a mastermind, those things have been completely invaluable as far as that process goes. Um, we're almost out of time for this week's episode. Is there anything else that you want to leave the listener with before we head out?
Yeah, one thing, and I think it really comes down to if we a big question that a lot of people have is the meaning of life. What is the meaning of life? Ultimately, it's really where philosophy really started, is trying to answer that question of what is the meaning of life. And a lot of, from the old school days, you can say thousands of years ago, ancient wisdom has brought it down to one particular thing. Not all, but a majority of philosophies say that the meaning of life is happiness. And so that's one thing that I can recommend is if you have a part of your life, regardless if you feel like you're settling or not, is it bringing you happiness? If it's not, then you know you are settling.
Mhm.
That's the most important thing. So I'll leave it at that.
Nice. All right. So until next time, if people want to check out more episodes of the podcast, where's the URLs for them to go?
Yeah, check out two places, youtubeformen.com and mailpodcast.com.
Sweet. Thanks for this episode. And until next time, we will catch you later.
Take care.
What's the name of your book, or what's the working title?
So the working title is The Complete Man.
Okay. Um, what's the kind of like 50,000 foot view of it?
The 50,000 foot view is basically it's like an well, I shouldn't say encyclopedia, but basically giving the guys a 360 view of what a complete man looks like and how to have a complete life, basically.
Nice.
Yeah.
Have you this is something that when I was working with Landon on, he had something called Influence Architects. One of the things that kept coming up, we had a lot of guys and girls that were in the group that were like been successful for 15 years and just completely hated. Like if on the outside, you look at everything they've accomplished and you just be like, wow, that must be so awesome to be them. But then when we started talking with them, just were completely miserable with
Mm,
so many aspects of their life. And it was weird. It just kept coming up over and over again. Like I put my ladder up against this wall, I climbed all the way to the top of the wall, and now I feel like that entire climb was a waste of my time, and I put my ladder up against the wrong wall.
mm. Yeah, that's very common. That's what we call working from the outside in, right?
Yeah, yeah. Right.
Yeah, and the whole premise of the book is working from the inside out.
What inspired you to write it?
This book, two things. A is basically my entire life's experience, right? Like in all honesty, Nathan, this is, if we take a look at, everybody's meant to do something. This was kind of my path
Hmm.
with my experiences in life with my grandfather, the teachings, and my dad and everything. What really inspired me to write this particular book was my dad. So my dad passed, and my dad passed, I would say, in his viewpoint. I'm not gonna. It would be tough for me to say this, but I will on my perspective as well, as an incomplete man, right? Because he had everything just like you talked about, but he still wasn't fully fulfilled in certain aspects. And so that is my driving force, is because I don't want other men to live incomplete lives when they don't have to.
Hmm.
And right now, the other thing that's driven me to write this is that there are so many other people so many other influencers that are teaching people one aspect of their life. And because they focus in that one aspect of their life, like you said, they become miserable in other aspects.
I'm gonna bring Jonathan on real
Yeah.
quick. Oh, I should probably stop the YouTube stream too.
Yeah. There you go. Live.
All right.